ready whenever you are.
Okay, call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Take the floor.
Okay, the page that was right on top, which is the agenda, shows items that, in the left-hand column with the minus parentheses, those were accounts that this year look like we're going to end up with excess budget. And so it's unused funding that we were then proposing to allocate this year into the items that are on the right-hand column.
Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
The next the next page is the same thing. So then the more eye-straining pages, these are, once again, there is no projection on these pages for what is anticipated to the end of this year, except to the extent that we are looking that these numbers are going to be shuffled around, and then the budget will end up being on target. But there are certain items that are over budget that everybody knows about. There's the road work that even after getting more in CHIPS money than we thought, still ends up being overdrawn by, my recollection is about $30,000. Yeah. So that's one item that's causing there to be some drawdown of fund balance this year. Also, the legal fees. There's a specific amount, I'm thinking about 20,000 over budget, without us getting into more problems between now and year end. So those are my recollections of the two items that were of the most concern about where they were going in this year's numbers.
So last year when we had the audit done and we had saved the 54,000, we had planned on using that money to do Sharon and Highview. So we thought we were going to use the 50, and we are only using 30, which is not that terrible. Because we got more money from the CHIPS, like you said. The original 20 was going to be for Walnut, which is what we used. So I think we kind of expected that, because we knew we had to do that road work.
Yeah.
So.
Now, there's one thing that you don't have here, although you usually get it in your report, the balance sheet for the village.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets into what is being looked at between now and next year for fund balance. When I started out saying that, that we were looking at, the right-hand column, preliminary budget, is what is being proposed for next year. In taking those numbers, some of the numbers are in the revenue side are coming out of fund balance. And the way this is written, it will be leaving fund balance with approximately $55,000. About $57,000, I believe. That is about 10% of next year's budget, which is what I was talking about earlier. That you've heard all this stuff about school districts and how much they have in fund balance, and that you guys are all aware of what, should it be higher, should it be lower, should you be building it up higher. All that give and take has to do with what the tax rate's going to be and what it is, and determine where you end up. With this here, as Joe explained, you would be under the cap with this proposed budget, and you would have in the $15,000 in the budget for the village hall work. You would have the tennis court work. We propose taking some money out of fund balance to allow for about $45,000 in snow next year, which is more than was budgeted this year and probably more than is going to be spent this year for snow. So there's a little more security there. The one question mark is legal fees.
And we may recap some of those, but there's not gonna be this year.
Next year.
It'll be next year, it'll be
Yes.
for the budget next year, if we, if we.
Well, if you recap, and that's, recapture, and that's always a question mark. It's,
That's
you
kinda
al-
extra.
Yeah, you can always ask, but it's the judge's decision as to whether to allow that. And
So I don't think we can count that, that could just be yes or no.
you never know. So in any case, this is looking at bringing fund balance down to 10%. Now, it's quite a bit higher than that now. I'd have to take a look and see what exactly the numbers are, but 30.
A little over 30%.
So it's a big reduction, and that is if we stay on budget next year.
Well,
And as you targeted, the village hall is one of the items.
Mhm.
With that, if that isn't done, I'm not saying taking it out of the budget, I'm saying if that isn't done, that's 15,000. The percentages run at about 5,000 for 1% in the fund balance. So that would give you back about 3% on top of the 10.
Is there a historic or legal floor for the fund balance? We've in a couple of years ago, we had way too much in the fund balance. But, we've been kind of paring it down, and now we're kind of going down to, it sounds like the kind of the minimum? Is that the legal minimum?
Well, no, there isn't actually a legal minimum for municipalities.
Oh, no? I thought it was like the schools.
No, the schools, it's dictated, but not for municipalities. I've looked it up and for what is the guidance from the state controller's office. And the guidance runs, it runs anywhere in written form, not mandated. It runs anywhere from 5 to 12. It's not mandated, and it's not, I know Brookhaven is higher than that. Smithtown is quite a bit higher than that. So it's just a question of what you decide you think is reasonable. And, it's the trade-off between that and higher taxes.
Yeah, I mean,
And you're saying-
I'm sorry, in the last 3 years, we put $70,000 back into that fund balance that wasn't there.
Yeah.
So, it was starting to get a little bit higher,
And where are we now? I'm sorry, I missed
Yeah.
that. Did you say it was 30, we're at about 30%
Yeah.
Before any drawdowns.
before any drawdowns?
Yes, and there are drawdowns proposed in the budget.
Right.
The thing that concerns me is that when you have, like, the town of Brookhaven, 1% is a lot of money.
Yes.
And for us, in absolute dollars, you're not talking about a whole lot of reserve. And if we get locked into, these legal things, it just, when it rains, it pours, and then it's kind of a scary situation. But if you feel that in terms of what will be left, the 10%, we'll be okay with that, then I think the good outweighs the bad. But I'm a little uncomfortable.
Well, you don't,
Well, in history, right, we've been having a surplus of 30%, right?
No,
No?
we had, it was decreasing each year before we got into,
Per
how much was
person.
it, Joe? It was 225,000 was spent in the 5 years before we got here.
Like that.
Yeah,
I guess.
so we had $225,000
Right,
extra.
and we purposely started paring that down over the years. I guess the question is, though, if we go down to 10%, had we applied that in previous years, would that have been enough?
No.
See, that's the key.
No, one year they went $145,000 over budget.
Okay.
So there was, if we don't have,
No, yeah.
they had 200 and
Yeah.
something in there, but if they didn't, then what would happen?
235,000, I think, at the time,
Mhm.
in surplus.
The budget as we have, and there was a lot of work done by Dee, by Joe, by Natalie. You know, we worked and reworked the budget, the proposed budget for next year numbers. They are reasonable, but there is not any, I don't believe there's any fat in there. We've removed the fat. You know, you hit it right on with the village hall. And then there are always the question mark things, which are always gonna be legal fees and snow, the big ones.
Mhm.
And those are unpredictable, so.
What do we have a tree situation? That's roads, right? We'll take it
Well, what we did last year is we did have an item for trees, because Harry had come before the budget and said, I want $10,000, and we used that to trim back the trees. But yeah, usually it's in maintenance.
So are we keeping that line? Is there still a line for that now? I don't see it.
Grounds maintenance.
Tree out grounds maintenance.
Grounds,
However, grounds maintenance is a number that's reflective of the contract, I believe.
Right, so if we have, like when we had that tornado, that was a killer for us.
Yeah, $35,000.
Yeah. So, well, how often is that?
Every 100 years?
Right, we just had a tree fall down today.
Yeah.
Roger, you know, I always drove home to bring my garbage down, but I didn't.
They'll do that tomorrow. I think they were gonna try and do both this morning, but then
Yeah,
he
no.
texted me late, and he's like, we just can't. I think it looks fine to start. I think we can, I agree, I think we cut everything that we can cut, but maybe you're right, maybe we should take that out and look at, I didn't look at snow removal.
Well, before you get on to that, I will have to tell you that you're gonna be looking at one of these items that's gotta be increased. We didn't figure that one out when we had these, our two discussions on the fiscal budget. We had a proposal for a service agreement by Small Business Management Associates Solutions, which is our bookkeeping service. And we increased their budget by $1,000 for the whole year. They're going from 55 to 65.
You do have that in at 60,
Or,
63, I can't read the number,
Mhm.
63.
Yeah, that's what it is here. 63.
63, yeah.
So I think we're okay on that one.
You got another one too, right,
But
John?
that's only, again, that is only for, well, all the other stuff, I guess, comes under the supplies. If we're looking at, when we file the income taxes, when we file the W-2s and W-3s, W-4s, et cetera, they all cost us because they're all online. And sometimes we're looking at the fact that we have to physically change our bookkeeping thing from QuickBooks 1, QuickBooks 2, to QuickBooks, well, I think we're in QuickBooks 10 now.
Right,
And they keep changing that every year or two. So we just changed it last year. It cost us, I think, $900 to make the change. Bring it to new QuickBooks system, which is QuickBooks 10. They got QuickBooks 11 next year. You're gonna be looking at another $900. And you're looking at a budget in your accounting supplies of $900, so that's gone.
okay.
That means that anything else that she does regarding mailing or out the W-2s and 1099s, et cetera, preparing them. And they cost us, because we have to file our rolls with the state and federal governments. So every time you do the filing, it costs you money. So, yeah, you get the 6,300 in there, but I don't think that's gonna work too well.
Okay, so you think, okay, so those two you're recommending that we increase?
I would say, yeah, because if you look at your existing budget, you're talking about 5,500. She's only $1,200 off of that.
Mm.
So 6,300, yeah, it's her pay, but that's 63, you either have to change that one or change the supplies, to increase the supply side a little by a nudge. Say $300, make that $1,200 or so, but you're still looking at a situation where you're gonna make a change. We have another change on Big Yank, the cleaning service for the fall, because I'm still trying to ascertain what's going on with him.
What category is that under? Joe, is that, village
That'd be
hall?
under Village Hall.
Okay,
And that's part of a big conglomerate in Village Hall, because Village Hall is a catch-all for everything in the building. It goes from copy paper to garbage bags and everything else, and toilet paper and the rest of that stuff. Everything's in there, in Village Hall.
and what was his increase?
I don't know if he's got an increase, that's the problem I'm looking at. His listing is cleaning services bi-weekly for $75 bi-weekly, and currently it's $75 every week. So I don't know if he's talking about going down to bi-weekly, or he made a mistake when he wrote that out and made it bi-weekly. So I've been trying to get a hold of John and ask him the question, but I can't get a hold of him.
Okay.
I
Don't we
keep
have a
sending out
contract?
notices.
Okay.
That's a new contract. But he thinks
So-
it's a mistake, because right now
New
he comes
contract.
every week, but that contract says I'm only coming every other week.
This was bid out, wasn't it?
No,
No, it's the,
it was just done by request form. You don't have to bid it.
I know that, I'm saying, I mean, if there's
His,
some,
his normal bill is $75 a week for 4 weeks. $300.
I mean, it doesn't sound outrageous to me, but I'm just saying, if we're now looking carefully at every line here, that
We look at
there's no,
carefully,
there's
but
no.
you don't look at the small lines, look at the big lines.
Yeah, well,
Well, if there's no increase, it sounds like there is no increase.
Sounds like-
He made a mistake
I
with the
think
five.
it's
yeah.
a mistake?
No, he put 5 by mistake, which is still $75.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so
that should be
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean, otherwise it would be double.
Right.
But you might, like I said, you might have to pick up the supply side on the bookkeeper, number one. And it's something else that I didn't want. That I have to question on. I don't know.
Well, the trees, that do concern me, and that is, I'm thinking that it's in street. But if I'm mistaken,
No,
then-
trees should be in maintenance, grounds maintenance. Where the hell is it?
well, it's on the next to last page, about 2/3 of the way down. It's at 25,000. So what is the contract?
10 months at 17, 10 months at 18, so the contract for this parks maintenance is 18 grand out of that
So
25,
that leaves 8.
7. 18 from 25, 7,000. Which is gonna be running tight.
well, that's really, we don't really know until we get prices, right? So,
Because that's, your ground maintenance, you've got listed at 25, and if you look at the other thing that you look at normally would be street maintenance,
That's at 35, I think.
yeah, no, it's 30. Supplies and services is 30, but you're talking 30 grand for whatever street you're gonna be doing. Not too much. Considering, well, that's 30, but you got 20 in chips coming in, or should have 20. You can apply for 20,000 for chips, so you're looking at 20 grand to spend on a road.
I think too, Ron, we
Just to
could,
do
we could,
Washington Street, that's 500 foot cost is $17,000.
all right. I forgot about that we did that.
Just one more big one.
We also have, I think that we can maybe take the increase dramatically, decrease the elections, because this year the village attorney will be at the election. And he hasn't been in the past, because he's had conflict, but he doesn't this year. So we've had outside counsel, which we won't have, and he's at a contracted rate, which is a different rate.
Okay, I'm not worried about the Natalie
Yeah.
thing anyway, it's
Okay.
only a few hundred.
Mm.
Your election's 3 grand, so
Okay.
you are looking at a big chunk of money right there.
Joe, does curbing come out of streets?
Streets.
Because, we haven't even talked about that, but, we do have some issues. There was, Maple was brought up
Right.
last week, and I noticed, here and there, but definitely on Walnut, across the street from the Hesses, and front of Mike's house on Chestnut.
Well, I feel like this year, the snow guys came by pretty quick and like took a lot out, and I'm not sure, I mean, this is really a question for Joe Poquott, is do we put a claim into them to repair that? Because that's gonna, you know, this, you know,
You know, the problem to me is that those curbs
They're not
are,
responsible.
they're so easily ripped up
mhm,
that if, and given our roads and the way they are, it's almost, to me, it's almost impossible to not have the clip of curb. I mean, I don't.
well, it happened in the town too. I mean, if you go down Old Town Road, they took out the berms that were there too.
So I'm not sure that I would say it's their fault and we should
Right.
have incurred this expense. We had damage, we probably are gonna wanna pay for it, and we haven't really done a real thorough survey of just what needs to be done, but just casually walking around with a dog, I can tell you that
Me too.
there's enough that's a project.
Mhm.
So that's something that, you know, if it's just lumped together in roads, you know, we have to kind of take a look at that whole line, because I think, we always have road sign.
Right, well, we're gonna have in the spring the potholes, plus this.
Yeah.
As for this curb damage from flowers, should there be some discussion with them as to whether snow stakes should be used in certain areas?
I know up where the Belgian block is on this side, they do have, people do put in sticks.
The residents, the owners of,
Some, Code does it too.
Code does it?
Mhm.
Joe
Yeah.
has
We ran out of-
reflectors all on his, on Walnut, for
Mhm.
the curbing he did. I guess the village paid for some, he paid for that.
Yeah, for the concrete.
He put in reflectors on that.
Mhm. But that's concrete.
No, I was gonna say the berms aren't curbs, so let's not
Right.
call them curbs.
Right.
they are berms?
They're berms, yeah.
What's the difference? I thought it was just the opposite.
Why?
Because a berm, I thought was like 2 feet high or something.
No, well, you saw the way they make the berms.
Yeah.
See, they just mound over
Yeah.
asphalt.
Yeah.
So it's not really a curb line. There's no sidewalk, there's no division between street and sidewalk, it's not really a curb. So if you wanna call it a micro berm, call it a micro berm. But it's not really a curb. There's no, it's not defining anything.
It's just controlling runoff.
Yeah, that's all it's for.
Okay. You learn something every day. So
Yeah.
That's why it's so cheap when we do the budgeting for it. When we don't get curbing in, we were doing the whole thing on, 2 roads we just did this year. You know, getting the curbing in it's a massive expense.
Mhm.
Because they're pouring concrete, they're digging a foundation for
They're molding
it. It's
it.
separate from the road.
Yeah, well, actually, that's where I was going with this. which is,
Oh,
to start
money
budgeting
issues
for curbs.
aside, money issues aside.
I'd love to curb the whole entire place,
Yeah.
believe me.
Right, I mean, it's just
Yeah,
every
Afraid if I
year,
could mine, I
we put these
If you
That's
wouldn't
what I was
allow,
gonna
if
do.
you wouldn't allow, the roads are all done.
we put them down, and then they get ripped right up.
Yeah.
And that's what Susan Laskowski was saying.
Mhm.
you
And she
know?
made a good point.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
So at some point, we need to start, you know, when we really get to thinking long planning, is to say, you know, we really need to start thinking about, especially strategic locations, you know, where she was talking about, and, you know, the bottom of, say, Chestnut. There are places where we don't want to keep replacing these things. It's some expense.
Well, where you want to start is, if you were going to start this project, you do it at the intersections, at the corners, where it's rounded,
Yep.
because that's where they get knocked out. Those straight runs like on Washington, like you were saying, why do they always stay so long, right? It's when they're making the turns and they're clipping and popping.
And those are the ones that have got ripped out.
Tell me about it, I was 40 foot on my street.
The block here got damaged too on seeing, but like that needs to, obviously we need to check that out. Because all that block that's there, that pops up so easy. And even this morning I was on a run and there was, not sitting on White Pine.
Oh, you're talking about the Belgian block?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank God the handyman does all that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, well, plows hit that too,
Yep.
Mhm.
which I can't understand, because the stuff I'm seeing were between Washington and stop sign is on a straight run.
Right.
Well, anyway,
There's
getting back
5
to
lots
the
missing.
So, are we gonna say that the amount for, I mean, assuming that we have to do these berms, blacktop berms, and,
I got it thinking.
pothole berms, that, we're gonna need, you know, to spend some money on that, and that's before we even start doing any other, you know, railroad repair. Although we haven't identified anything like that for this year, have we?
No, well, code will go out when there's no snow. They started, we do have a couple of potholes,
Yeah.
and that's, they
Who did the
started.
one at the top of
They did.
Washington. Oh, he did?
Mhm.
Because I had dumped rocks in there.
Yeah,
And they lasted a couple of days, but then the thing just kept getting bigger and bigger, and then it just.
If it was a little bit warmer, he would have hot sealed it, but
Yeah.
he couldn't.
No, it was home.
Yeah,
So we use cold patch, I guess.
yeah.
I'll also remind you that chips is not available for any potholes and or curbing.
Mm-hmm. Just for the streets.
So-
Berms, I should say, curbing they'll take care of.
Is berming a word?
Berms, yes.
Berming.
Berming, yes.
Okay.
If there were a number to reconsider, it would be the question of trees and how much is in grounds. Whether the number, as Joe said, of 7,000 is adequate to deal with other issues plus trees.
What was the figure?
Well, what would be the other issues besides
Well,
trees?
7,000 basically would be,
Yes,
well, here
the
again,
trees.
I
It's-
haven't opened, he got it. I haven't seen it.
other items that we
It's
would
open.
ask the contractor, the landscape contractor to take care of for physical parks. Replacing something, again, replacing a tree, et cetera, would be part of that process.
Did you get all the bids for the trees, but you didn't open them?
I have 2 bids for the trees so far,
Okay,
which we have not looked at,
okay.
and I'm waiting for, I guess, another one or so. I have not heard from Clovis, we have not heard from Ron,
Okay. Do you want to open them in April?
probably.
Okay. I'm just thinking that, we could probably use that.
I don't wanna even look at that number.
Okay.
Although I did look at one.
So how was that number
It's because it
arrived
wasn't sealed,
No.
I tell you.
at? The number that we're using, is that, did we borrow from that at all?
No,
That's, okay, because we figured that we were okay if we don't have disaster.
for
For
grounds.
trees, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well,
again, it's just a question as to whether the 7 is going to be used, as Joe said, for any tree planting or anything other that is over and above the grounds contract.
Yeah. But we had no plans for that.
No.
We did everything with the trustees.
Mm-hmm.
Walnut is not gonna be any of this.
No,
So-
we don't have a, we have to get a plan first and go from there. So,
I'm okay with that. There's nothing else that we have on the horizon.
so you're recommending, even though we're not sure whether we have to do it or not, that we pierce the tax cap, we vote to pierce the tax cap tonight?
Just
Yes.
Yeah,
request-
okay. I agree, 'cause we don't know. So. Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments or?
We got to set up another meeting to
Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
finalize this.
Yeah. And once I can get, I can use these numbers from Natalie, but, the snow is a big question mark. I'd like to get an update on current year numbers from Natalie, once she gets these in. That's no,
Once we get the numbers in from this month, for the
yes,
snow removal, we'll have a good picture of what we're looking at. We just got the
Yes.
numbers in for the February numbers, which, like I said, was
I don't know if there is an average.
$3,600.
once we get those, I can do a projection to year end, and then we'll know where we are.
Yeah.
It depends.
Did they plow for you?
Not really, but sand, they put down sand because there was really nothing, it was melting, so,
So this was like a major storm.
So they determined.
Alex's girlfriend's mother
Mhm.
in Nassau County, she showed me pictures, had 16 inches of snow. 16 inches, I mean, the picture, it was like a mile of snow.
Which would have been more if it wasn't so condensed and.
Yeah, but I mean, still. So we didn't have to move that around, we didn't have.
No, and it was raining in the morning, so that made the
That's
street wet.
20, all right, so. we were lucky.
20.1 inches.
Yeah. So anyway, the bill is gonna be,
That's your-
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it should be not that big a deal. It's minimal for sanding and,
Just trying
There were
to
2
close
trucks
it.
out,
Yeah, they were out,
they were out, I don't know if they were out all night, but
They made a bunch of passes
just,
here.
yep,
the plow?
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
they were out around, I'm gonna say somewhere around 4. Because Harry was on the phone to me, asking me how much snow I had, so he figured out he was gonna go out and plow at night.
He was
And I
out.
told him that the truck was out.
Yeah, and that was,
I
so
heard him.
David was out doing some plowing for them, and he was just doing some, as he was going, taking some of the stuff off the roads too, so like, up by Tinker Bluff, they just really put down sand because they were kind of dry.
Mhm.
Not dry, but you could see the pavement.
Yeah, but I don't think we have an understanding with them about, if the truck is out,
Mhm.
but one road is already okay because, David or somebody just.
Yeah, I was
didn't
like,
get-
is it a flat fee for the truck?
Yeah,
Is
that's
it
what I'm saying.
Passes, like.
The guy's out.
Plow
Because
down,
of the
plow up,
owner of the
changes.
company,
By the
he's
hour.
still got his guys out.
It is by the hour,
Yeah.
and based on
I
the truck
think
that's
they were-
out by the
I saw them
hour?
this morning when I left, so.
$115 an hour for each truck.
They charge you for salt and sand too, or no?
That comes from the
Town
town.
charges us for the salt and sand, they can't charge us because it's on the truck to spread it. But that's the hourly rate for
Sure.
the truck itself.
Mhm.
So, we have a bill inside for $2,300 from February for 3 storms.
That was for sand and salt?
No, that was
That was
just
just trucks.
plowing.
Oh.
Yeah. Just plowing, it was, 2 trucks, and they're out there for 4 hours apiece, so that's 8 hours at $115. Next day was, like 4.5 hours.
Mhm.
Next door, 4.5 for one and 5 for the other, or something like that there, but, it's $115 an hour just to get the truck out there. They don't have to hit the street,
Right.
they can hit the rest of the streets, if one of them's clear, they gotta keep going. They're only out there on the hourly basis, we're not paying for tonnage, we're not paying for, huge trucks, et cetera, these are pickup trucks with
Right,
plows on them,
yeah.
with sanders on the back.
Sure.
Well, there's one guy
We paid the
in
town
Walnut
rent.
Park this morning, just sitting there. So I don't know if he could have been anybody. I don't know
Oh,
if he was one of our contract plowers there, but he wasn't doing it. He was just kind of
So they
sitting in
Taking
the
a break?
street. Is that included in the hourly rate?
No,
I'm sure.
we contract with Brookhaven,
Right. And
and
they
they
said,
pick it up.
right,
Brookhaven bills us with sand, salt
okay.
directly.
Alright.
They
And
just pick
usually
it up.
it's that side that needs the more sand and salt because they have the hills. But we didn't really have a lot of it melted, so they just were throwing it down to make sure it didn't freeze,
Yeah, there's no problem getting that this morning.
No, you're right. I was surprised. I was surprised the school was even canceled because I was like, there's nothing wrong with the roads.
Yeah, me too.
Were you, did you have to
No,
work?
I have no idea why they didn't bring us in
Dude.
today.
I know, because they had the 2-hour delay last night, so I figured, that'll be good enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, so I don't, anyone else have any questions? I mean, you could always email Ron or Natalie or myself or Joe. If you get the magnifying glass and look at it a little closer.
I'm not sure when we're gonna get together then and final,
Well, we'll do the budget hearing at the April meeting,
yes.
okay?
12th,
The 12th or the end,
has to be about 15th.
15th, it has to be, presented, and then
I'm just talking about us
Yes,
getting together.
and then the 30th, by the end of the month, on the 30th, it has to be approved. So, but I feel if it's done and we're set with it, we'll approve it the same night. So if not, then we'll have another meeting at the end of the
So
month.
when do you wanna get together again? Do we know? We don't know yet.
No.
Until we get the bills.
So
Mhm.
Thursday morning. But it
Okay,
has
you
to
let
be,
me
it
know.
has to be
I'll
after we
be
get,
available whenever.
I don't know when we're gonna get the bill from Quickly.
We could
That's the
meet,
problem.
the 4 of us again, put in the final thing.